Hey Mark, how are you?
Hey, good. Hugo, how are you?
Good. How about the Dodger win last night?
Man, that was incredible. That was a crazy game. I was so
Yeah.
happy for uh, Andy Pajes, coming through in the 10th. It was, I don't know, man. I'm nervous the whole time, even though the
Yeah.
game means nothing, just because I think it's the Padres. So
Had to
ex-
win.
exciting times.
Well, I wanted to invite you, especially because I wanted to celebrate the work that you've done on like new show Leanne and How We Roll, Gary Unmarried, Man with the Plan, but specifically about our time on Mike and Molly. Would you be able to start with your name and also what your role was towards the end of the seasons?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Mark Gross, and I was initially, oh man, you really stumped me. I think initially I was in at a supervising producer level on Mike and Molly,
Yeah.
which I can get into that in a minute. It's just a title. It doesn't, your job is the same no matter what your title is, kind of thing.
Okay.
But then I think I ended up working my way up, that we ended up finishing 6 years later,
Yeah.
6 seasons later. I was one of the co-executive producers on the show at the end. It was,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. So,
Yeah.
what would you say is one of the proudest episodes from that show for you?
Um, I think one that really, well, the finale, of course, was a biggie because at that
Yeah.
point I was fortunate enough to be able to, I ran the writers' room, so I
Yeah.
got to decide how the series was going to end to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Obviously the script would go through Chuck Lorre and then Al Higgins and everyone else, but it like I got to make that decision. And I remember on that final episode, we had a theme song done by Kev Mo,
Yeah.
called For the First Time in My Life I See Love.
Right.
And so it was always on, and then in the finale, Mike and Molly end up adopting. They finally get a child adopted,
Yeah.
and in the room, I was kind of like, we were sort of joking. It was me, it was Carla Felicia, it was Michael Globerman and Bill Daly. And we were kind of thinking, what if they just, as they're looking at the baby, they're like, and they were like, well, they're going to sing something, and I go, is it too corny if they sing the song that's also the theme song? I was that weird. And that's
Yeah.
a huge, like, are we going to look sappy or is this going to be effective? And it's that
Yeah.
weird gamble that you take. And ultimately, I was like, let's do it. I go, let's take a big swing and see what they think. And ultimately, Chuck loved it and Al loved it. And it was sort of a cool moment at the end of this series where Melissa McCarthy and Billy Gardell are actually, singing the theme song to the actual show that they were on, which is it's weird. It was a weird gamble, but it really worked and it paid off.
No, I
So
mean, I think it just
yeah.
tied the whole show together and it really like ended it very nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great moment. There was also a great episode with Reno Wilson, who played Carl, Mike's
Yeah.
partner on the show, where I remember he goes back to find his mother. He didn't have a mother,
Yeah.
growing up. His grandmother raised him, who was this great, really fun, iconic, character on the show. And she had lied to him his whole life and said that, he didn't have a mother. Well, it turns out he did have one, but she didn't tell him because the woman was troubled and she didn't want her grandson to think that a mother would abandon him for some reason. So
Right.
he's mad at her and he goes in search of his mother, but because she's dying. But and this doesn't sound funny at all. But when they get there, it's too late and they have to come home. And there's this great moment where he comes home and we're like, how are we going to resolve this dispute between this grandmother who's lied to this guy his whole life? And we were like, let's not write anything. Let's let again, it was another musical moment where Cleo, the actress, is playing the piano and Reno walks in. He doesn't say anything. He just sits next to her on the piano and they sing this song together. And it was this really beautiful moment, at the end,
Yeah.
and that I'm really proud of that episode too. Yeah. That
Yeah,
was
that's so true. And I could picture all those scenes right away.
yeah.
So just to stick with the finale, that was really fun to see and to witness unfold from beginning to end. For you and your experience, how was it like for day one to get that script going?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I got to work on the pilot, so I was
Yeah.
literally a writer on it every single episode. And it was a journey because I had never, what was unique on this show, it
Yeah.
was we room write, which means one person isn't sent off on draft to write the script and bring it back.
Yeah.
What was unique about this was that it's almost like a band playing a song. Like all the writers are in there, and we all pitch, and we sort of build the script, as if we're, acting out the scene together as we're
Yeah.
writing it. And that's kind of it was a new process for me, and I had never done it that way. I was always sent off to write on my own and then come back. So it took some adjustment to get used to that, but I grew to love it and see the value in it because it kept the tone of the show consistent.
Right.
If one person's sent off to write it, they're going to have a slightly different take, but this made every script sort of feel more consistent, with the voices of the characters because the same people were collectively writing every script together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. And especially like you said that you guys had known each other for so long. I think by this time, everybody kind of really knew everybody's strengths and just kind of what they brought to the table.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point, Hugo. I think one of the tricks of being in the writer's room is working with people. If you're not in this instance where you've ever worked with someone before. So
Yeah.
like I had known Mark for Mark Roberts for years, and like those old relationships help because you kind of have a you have a shorthand with each other.
Yeah.
But one of the tricks is immediately adapting to people you've never worked with or met before,
Sure.
and writing together. Sometimes you immediately connect, sometimes you don't. So that's one of the skills you have to learn is to just adapt to new voices, people with different ideas and different approaches than you.
Right. So just to give an example, on the day of the table read where the cast gets to read the first script, how do you make adjustments to notes or any type of additions to the script?
Yeah, that's a great question. You sit down at the table read with the best of hope, the best of hopes. You're optimistic, you're hoping everything works, but of
Yeah.
course that never happens. Everything doesn't always go well. So we sit and we listen at the table as the actors are reading it, and uh, when it's on its feet, it's different.
Yeah.
So at a table, everyone's sitting; they're not moving. So if there's action in the scene, you
Right.
have to kind of picture it and go, is that going to work? So the table read is the first like kind of step. You're dipping your toe in the water to see does the dialogue work without action, and if it
Yeah.
doesn't work, like if the jokes are flat, then we go through the script and you'll just mark. Like everybody has a different system. I put
Right.
B. If the joke isn't funny, I put a B next to it as I'm listening to the table read, which means beat the joke, meaning improve the joke, get a better version of the joke.
Uh-huh.
If it does work, I do a check mark, meaning check okay. And then you just kind of go through that. Then when you go back to the room, you don't have to remember what worked and didn't work because you have a physical copy of it in front of you. And then we just kind of go through it as a group and say, I didn't think this. And there's sometimes people are wrong. They go, oh, I thought that totally worked. And you're like,
Huh?
all right, I guess we'll see, but it's also not an audience at the table read. As you know, it's
True.
executives.
Yeah.
It's executives. There's no audience other than the performers and the crew,
Mhm.
and that's nice, but that's not a completely random group of people watching, so you also have to take that into account that these people on the crew already know all the characters, they know everything, so
Yeah.
that's why you're in for surprises on tape night, um because you're like, well, why didn't that work? Well, a group of an audience is going to of just general people are going to react differently than people who are familiar with the show, I guess.
Right. And through this show, you've also been able to collaborate with other creatives like the cast, I mean, the director, Jimmy Burrows. Who,
Mhm.
what's your relationship with these type of professionals?
Yeah, I luckily I had worked with Jimmy previous to Mike and Molly on another show at CBS, and
Yeah.
so I was very fortunate to get to work with, James Burrows is, you know, probably the greatest. Well, I think it's subjective, but I think the greatest, multicam television director in history, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's amazing, and so I was lucky to get to work with him on another show, and kind of I just happened to say the right, like pitch the right joke at the right time when
Yeah.
he was next to me. So that was really fortunate for me. So he knew me and liked me and kind of brought me along with him on other shows. Of course, that doesn't help you when when you go into Chuckland. It's they have to hire you. They
Right.
have to like you. A director isn't going to just get you a job. So I was really lucky that all those stars sort of lined up for me on Mike and Molly, and Jimmy went on to direct my first pilot that I'd written too. So it was, but the relationship with them was it's again, it's like you. My advice to people is always learn the language of the person you're trying to work with. Like
Right.
study James Burrows, see what he's looking for, see what he responds to. Study Chuck. Like the beginning when I'm first starting as a writer, I listen way more than I talk, and I go, okay, this is what they're looking for. He likes this kind of joke. He likes
Right.
stories that are driven by emotion, not situation. You learn things like that, and then you go, okay, say things that he's going to find useful, he or she is going to find useful, and more importantly, don't say things that they're not going to find useful,
Yeah.
because that slows things down, and it kind of makes them lose confidence in you when you pitch something that's not good.
Yeah,
So
and like
yeah.
you're doing your best work when you make their job easier. And like you said, when you get to
Yeah.
jump from show to show, you definitely have to learn to adapt quickly because that's one of the things that they look for is to be able to, find your strengths, part of the team.
That's true. That's very well said. And uh, some people, and one of the biggest things is adapting positively.
Yeah.
Like if it's your show and you're the runner, then it's sort of your job to say, hey, find my, this is my tone that I'm
Yeah.
looking for. This is the way that I see this show going. Help me find things like that. But when you're working for someone else, obviously you're going, what is the vision for this show? What are they looking for? What's the type of humor or the types of stories that they like to tell? And it's not your job to say, well, I think it should be done like this. It's your job to go, great, how about this? Great, how about that? You know what I mean? To find something in their uh that they want, is that they're looking for, that matches the how the show is ultimately going to look and feel.
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on how do you handle if things are not going well in the writer's room? How do you pivot or how do you find a solution to the issue in the room?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that happens frequently, just like in any relationship.
Yeah.
It's never smooth sailing, but what makes it stronger is when you hit a speed bump like that,
Yeah.
and then you find a solution together. I feel like you're stronger as a staff, or whatever, or even if it's just a personal relationship with one other person. You know
Yeah.
how that is. You're stronger after you've gone through a hardship.
Right.
So for me, someone told me this. I'm stealing this quote, but they said this industry is fueled by positive energy,
Yes.
positivity. If you're not, if you don't
True.
have positive energy, the industry has no use for you, and you will soon be unemployed and out of work. And I always remembered that. And that was Ira Ungerleider who told me that.
Oh, very cool.
Who was one of the Friends writers. Yeah. And he
Yeah.
told me that early on, and that always stuck with me. And it's so true. I mean, you want to work with someone who positively says, okay, we have a problem. Let's find a fun solution for this problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you want it, the job should be, a fun, positive environment. I mean, that's when you find fun stuff, when you have that attitude. So I always try and go at problems from what's a positive way to find a solution here, but
Yeah.
also being respectful, of the person who's, you know, troubled. But yeah, usually it's I'm very honest. I think honesty is good, but
Right.
but just having a a positive perspective, I think, goes a long ways. And it's a subjective industry. My friend Don Foster, our friend Don Foster,
Yeah.
used to always say it's a subjective industry, but everybody pretends like it isn't, which is a great quote too, because it's like it is. It's opinion. I mean, we don't know. You're guessing, and
Right.
hopefully you'll guess right as to whether this will be funnier than that, or more impactful. So ultimately it's a guessing game. But I think pitching and pitching multiple solutions. Like,
Yeah.
have something in your head. Okay, what if, instead of her leaving on the joke, what if she stays and tells the joke planted? will that help it? And just have it, okay, just have multiple options if your first one
Right.
doesn't work. Be prepared more than anything. you know
Yeah.
the night before work, I always go through the script every night, and I look through and I go, if this doesn't work, what am I going to say when that doesn't work?
Great.
you know
Yeah.
have alternate jokes for everything, have alternate story. Even if this scene doesn't work, what if the whole scene doesn't work? What are you going to say tomorrow when that scene's thrown out? You can be one of the people that's just sitting there going, oh, or are you going to have something ready to say? Like,
Yeah.
that's preparation is really the best way for problem solving, if you ask me. Preparing the night before and saying, I am going to, I you don't want to be caught flat-footed.
Yeah.
You do not want to be caught flat-footed. So just be absolutely prepared. Your job doesn't start. Here's what I will say, in
Yeah.
case we talk. Your job doesn't start when you sit down at work. Your job should be, it should be 24 hours a day. If you're in a creative field, and especially if you're a writer, you
Yeah.
should be thinking about the show when you're driving home. You
Yes.
should be thinking about the show when you're having your coffee in the morning. You should be thinking about the show when you're at the gym working out in the morning before you go to work. You should be thinking about the show all the time, in my opinion. I mean, obviously you want to be connected to your family when you get home. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about not just starting work the minute you get there. That's a
Right.
great solution. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And what do you do in the time between shows when you're, have time for yourself?
You mean like between shows or do you mean hiatus, or you mean like
Yes.
during the regular season? During hiatus, I always use the approach of writing. I would write a new pilot every year. So, because you never know if the show, you really don't know if the show's coming back. We're in an
Right.
industry where there's no sure thing. I mean, it's not like, okay, you're going to do 5 years in the show. You don't know that. You might do
Oh,
one, your job could end tomorrow. So during hiatus, I always write. I always
yeah.
go write a new pilot, get a new project going. Don't rely, never assume that whatever job you have or whatever thing you've just written is your only opportunity. You have to constantly be creating opportunities for yourself by creating new content. That's been vital to me. And also it
Right.
makes the industry and the agents, the studio, the network, they're going, wow, this person is cranking out all this material. They're very driven, and they take their job seriously. And so I always say, write. Just constantly be producing new material is
Yeah.
my advice to people.
Are you able to talk a little bit about how you landed at Mike and Molly? Just a quick journey about how you got there?
Sure. Um, everybody's journey is different. You and I have talked about this before. Like,
Yeah.
no two people's story is the same. So when people are like, how do you get a writing job? I'm like, I can't tell you that, because your journey is going to be different than mine was. For me, I graduated from college. I took, a lot of writing in college, but I've always wanted to write since I was a kid. And I always wanted to be a comic, as a stand-up comedian. When I was a kid, I would watch comedians on TV, and I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. So
Yeah.
that's the path that I took. I became a stand-up comic. That taught me how to write short, how to go, what's the shortest, quickest way to write something funny? What's the quickest way to convey this feeling in a funny way,
Yeah.
because when you're a comic, you can't blabber on for, I mean, you want to write the jokes as short. Every word is vital. Like,
Yeah.
you remove a word from a sentence and it's suddenly funny, you know? And you learn that as you go. So that was a big asset for me, was being a stand-up. And then I worked with a guy who I had written for years. I started writing for other comics as I was out there, because comics that I would work with would I would write for them. I'd go, hey man, I have a tag for you,
Yeah.
meaning I have a joke after the joke. And then they started going, do you just want to write? So I just started writing for other comics. And one of them got a development deal at ABC and asked me to co-write the pilot. Well, I had never written a TV script before.
Yeah.
I was in my by this time I was in my mid 30s, I guess. How old was I? No, my late 30s, I guess. Yeah. Well, like I was like 38 years old before I ever sold a show. I never sold
Wow.
a show till I was like 38, 39 years old. I was just a
Yeah.
stand-up the whole time. So that show aired, and then that led to I remember telling myself, you have to be the funniest person in the room. Like you have to be the best person. You can't, if you're second, third, or fourth, you may not have another job. So that's another thing I tell people. I go, you're either the
Great.
funniest person in the room or you're everybody else. And if you're everybody else, you're going to be looking for a job pretty soon. So be the funniest person, be the best person, be the most prepared person in the room. And that's sort of the attitude that I took. And then other writers that worked with me on that first show go, I want that guy to be the person working for me because
Yeah.
I want my job as a showrunner to be easier. So I want someone who constantly brings it, who's constantly, prepared and working hard. Like you have to outwork everybody. That's the only advantage you have. You can't control if someone's going to like the way you look, or if you remind them of someone they went to high school that they didn't like, or there's all these weird factors, or I don't know why I said that, but you know what I mean? Like anything can, like the guy wears a white t-shirt every day. I don't like him or whatever. Um, Not that that would happen, but I'm just saying, like all those factors, sometimes you just rub people the wrong way. But if you are constantly working hard and constantly prepared, it really improves your odds of consistently working. And so that's what happened to me. Other writers hired me. Um, and then that led to another show, another show. That show
Right.
I talked about before, Gary and Married with Jimmy Burrows, was a big break because then Jimmy started saying, when people see Jimmy listening to you, the studio and the network, they're like, wow,
Oh,
he's
yeah.
listening to this guy. There must
Right.
be something to this guy. And then Chuck, obviously, it's amazing Hall of Fame, comedy producer who's been more successful than him. I don't know. Norman Lear maybe that is equal, but I don't know that there's anybody better than Chuck,
Yeah.
so that helps when you work for someone like Chuck and he hires you and continues to hire you, people take notice. And then
Yeah.
that helps to get more, more clout with the, studios and networks.
Yeah, it's true. And that, I mean, from my experience, when I got that similar story of like Melissa McCarthy started to pay attention to my work, that started to build my confidence and also my identity as an artist because somebody like that was starting conversation with me about my work. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, everybody around me was interested as well. So I can definitely see where you're coming from that, just building those relationships.
And plus, you're a guy who, to illustrate my point, who was constantly working. Like when someone said, "What do you want to do?" You
Yeah.
weren't like, "Well, I always wanted to be an artist," and you were like, "Here's what I've done."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you had tons of material prepared that you've been working on your whole life. There's an old cliche that's when luck, you make your own luck. It's like luck is when preparation and opportunity meet,
Yes.
which is a great quote. And it's so true. Like you're going to get your opportunity. And when that comes, are you going to be prepared for it? Because if you're not prepared, you
Yeah.
know, your odds are significantly reduced. Like I always wanted to be a singer. Well, what have you sung? Nothing. But I was just wondering, well,
Yes.
why would I give, why would I hand you a microphone and have you open for me? So, preparation is everything. You had all of your materials done. I remember seeing them and
Yeah.
being really impressed at how much work you had done and how hard you continued to work while you were, you know, doing a job that was going to lead to another job, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, no, I just let, these projects consume me and only because like I got a lot of joy from doing like my Western project and to be able to share it with you guys, everybody around me and to get that positive reaction really did fuel that passion of knowing that this is something that I really wanted to do. So yeah, it's always great to have that support and that community around you.
But your passion showed in your work, and that's the other thing. Like
Yeah.
it was clearly evident that you loved what you were doing, and that's something too. Like, and which you should. If you don't, why are you doing something that
Yeah.
you don't love? I always was found that interesting. People I grew up with, I'm like, well, that's not really what you love, but you're doing it anyway. Like, I'm
Yeah.
always. I tell my daughter, I go, you're not going to be happy if you're not doing what you're passionate about.
Right.
You'll get a paycheck, but that's not fulfilling
Oh.
if it's not what you love. So, and
Yeah.
that shows in your work as an artist. When you're like, I'm really connected to this, that's when you create great stuff,
Yeah, well, with Vallero, I really did feel like I had so many moments where I thought to myself, okay, yes, th this is like what drives me. This is like my passion project. And I think that's what those little clicks was what kept me going because there was times where like it would fizzle out or I would just not give it enough time that like I wanted to. But when I did, and it kind of brought a different side of me, I always knew that I had to make sure that I always worked on it regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it should be something that you don't find it to be. It is a chore.
Yeah.
I think it was Dorothy Parker had a great quote where she goes, "I hate writing, but I love having written."
Yeah.
It's such a great quote, and it's the same. You're always like, ah, but what the thing that you're looking for, the fulfillment that you're looking for,
Yeah.
comes through the work that you have to do to do it. You
Yeah.
know, um, the thing that you're putting off, that you're avoiding, is the thing that's going to make you happy.
Yeah.
And so you know do the thing that you're putting off, because ultimately it's you have to break your own will,
Yeah.
to a certain extent, every
And
day.
And you won't find out what you're passionate about until you keep writing and until you keep exercising. Even like we had talked before, if you go do stand up or if you write poetry or if you paint, just to exercise every muscle, just to figure out what you're interested in and what you're passionate about.
For sure, do the thing that you're most afraid of,
Yeah,
to strengthen the skill of what you want to do. If you want to be a writer,
yeah,
I think it's great to do stand up, because guess what, when you're in the writer's room, you're pitching jokes,
yeah,
and if you know how to pitch a joke on stage and you have that confidence, the writer's room is doesn't seem as daunting. It's not as frightening because you've already done that. So yeah,
yeah,
and write all sorts of stuff. Write things that you think you're not going to. If you want to be a great comedy writer, try, write some drama too, because
yeah,
that's going to strengthen your story skills. You're already funny. Now work on story, work on drama, poetry, like you're saying, all those things, work all those muscles. It will strengthen the one that you're trying to strengthen, even though you don't know that. It doesn't make sense, but it does. It really, it
true.
pays great dividends. Yeah.
I had a conversation with one of the producers on the show that I'm on, and he was saying the same thing that it's very interesting how even a job like working at a restaurant or being around people strengthens being on a show or being a creative because it really gets you to experience that of being in a community and then all different types of personalities and also to know what you bring.
Yeah, that's so funny. It's like another thing I always tell my daughter is, I go, it's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle,
Yeah,
right? And you're given this piece and you're going, this piece doesn't fit anywhere. It doesn't make any sense. I'm a waiter right now. Well, that's not
yeah,
what I want to do. This doesn't make any sense. And that's what I did. I waited tables all through, college, to pay my bills. I bartended and all this stuff.
yeah,
But I'm going, well, this isn't what I want. Well, then later the puzzle starts to fill in and you realize that waiting tables piece of your puzzle
yeah,
taught you something. It gave you stories. It taught you to relate to people. It taught you to learn patience. It taught you to organize. All of those pieces fit in later, and you go, oh, I was dealing with the public in a service mode. Gave me
yeah,
empathy. It taught me about whatever pathos.
right.
It taught me whatever. It's all these things are lessons that don't make any sense at the time, but later fill out this puzzle, and you're going, oh, thank God I did stand up comedy. Thank God that relationship ended with that person, because that was supposed to happen to help me here. Like, it all makes sense later, but it's all based in faith. You just got to have faith that your journey is going to make sense later, and it does. I guarantee you, it does. It always will.
And like you said, stay positive and just like
Mhm.
everybody says, enjoy the journey and the process. But it really is true. And I had to learn that very early on just to keep that mindset.
Yeah, for sure. That's who wants. Think about who would you want you to be? You know what I mean? If you're working with someone,
Yeah.
who would you want that person to be? Would you want them to be someone who has a positive, take on the situation, or are you going to be someone who grumbles and talks about what's wrong? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like these are precious jobs that in the industry. and it's so fleeting. Like be super grateful every day. Take
Yeah.
a minute. Sometimes I'll stop in the writer's room and I'll just look around and I'll be like, how great is this that you're sitting here with
Yeah.
these hilarious people. And I've worked with some of the funniest people in the entire world, and what a blessing that is. And
Yeah.
be grateful for a moment,
Yeah.
and appreciate it. That really helps keep me, positive and grateful.
Yeah, I always think when I get to go through the gates, it's like I don't have to be here. I get to be here. And
Yeah, that's a
yeah, I
great way
just
of
start
saying
my day like that. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Someone just told me that too. Like the minute that arm comes up at Warner
Yeah.
Brothers or CBS or whatever, he goes, I stop and I want to get out and kiss the ground. In my mind, I get out and kiss the ground. It was a line producer that told me that when I was young, and I
Oh,
was like, wow, that's a great attitude, man.
yeah.
And it's right too, because it is a gift. And so make every moment count, make every word you write count, make every line you draw important,
Yeah.
make it important, because it's not a guarantee. There are no guarantees. Yeah.
That's right. Well, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate the conversation, and I'm glad we got to touch on all these subjects.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was great, man, and congratulations on all of your successes, and someday I hope we, someday I always in my mind hope that we, get to do a project together.
Yeah, we'll land on the same project.
I would love that. That's gonna happen. See, it's the positive, positive thought. If you don't think positively, there's no chance of it happening. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to you know put something specific out there into the world.
All right. I'll see you at the game, okay?
All right, thanks, Hugo.
See you later.